Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, the co-host. Daniel, nice to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. You know, our country worries about spreading American exceptionalism. We've talked about that, and of course there's different ways to look at the word exceptional. Most people who talk about that are talking about forcefully going about the world and teaching them about our wonderful democracy and how we run things here and our banking system and our taxing system, and they sort of think that we are the epitome and we should spread that message. Of course, I think of other things when I want to spread exceptionalism, but I'll tell you here, I found something where we really are number one on, and that is exporting weapons, you know, and just probably something that serves our interests very, very limitedly. I can't believe it serves our interests at all. It serves the interest of the military-industrial complex, but it's not a couple bucks. You know, it's over $40 billion of weapons we send overseas. So we talk about the military-industrial complex, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on, but we usually think, well, we're building F-35s and airplanes we don't need, and we're building up our military and this sort of thing. But here, this is just selling weapons. And you know that a lot of times, you know, it supports the military-industrial complex. And a lot of times these sales are guaranteed, you know, through subsidies and guaranteed loans, export-import bank loans, and all these things. But it's always, you know, with mischief. Though we're selling, so-called selling these weapons, it usually involves the foreign policy. What do you think would happen if I had this authority to wave my magic pen and just strike all those sales? I know what would happen with the lobbyists, but do you think it would hurt us in any manner?
It certainly wouldn't hurt us. It would hurt the people that make billions of dollars from it. You know? And this is a classic case, and you've said this over the years. You know, all of the research, all of the prototypes, this is all supported by the taxpayer. You know, it's all socialized, all the costs. But then when they're exported overseas, the profits are all privatized. The military-industrial complex is enriched. And they therefore invest money in think tanks and media and all of these sorts of things. They buy television networks and they promote it. So it's a sort of a vicious circle.
You know, they worried after Brexit was passed that you know, this whole thing would change. And of course, my concern was, yes, it's a great vote. It represents the people speaking out, but it's going to get real messy. It's just not automatically going to extricate the British from the European Union. But they worried that this would cut back on the British buying weapons. But now you hear stories. Don't worry about it, folks. They're still going to be buying. So I don't think Brexit is going to change the sale of weapons any way whatsoever.
You know, and I think we were pondering a few days ago why some neocons were in favor of it and some against. I think the ones in favor of it are hedging that the UK may actually start buying a lot more weapons because they don't feel like they can piggyback on an EU system, you know, so that's a payoff.
I see that one of the things that is a favorite for export, and we cross paths with the helicopter companies. And I guess there will be a good business for helicopters because it looks like they're going to use helicopters to pass out money, you know, Bernanke's method. But they sell a lot of attack helicopters. What do you think the reason is that they would be so popular, you know, to these various countries? I mean, there are numerous countries, but they seem to really like the attack helicopter.
Well, they can put down a lot of insurrections. Look at some of the places that that the U.S. sells these helicopters are some of the most repressive countries on earth. Look in the Middle East, where our allies, you know, will do anything to put down any kind of uprising or insurrection, even a peaceful one.
You know, whether it's our budget or this assistance to other countries, it seems like they're always planning and worrying about, well, if a war builds up, we have to be ready to defend ourselves. And I think the one thing that they don't consider is these plans for protecting against war are actually too often leading to the risking a war, the danger of a war, because sometimes people like to use these weapons.
Yeah, and look how U.S. foreign policy actually creates markets for these weapons that then benefit the weapons manufacturers who invest money into influencing U.S. foreign policy. Look at U.S. foreign policy toward Ukraine, for example. If we had not had this antagonistic policy, this regime change policy, we would never have been shipping weapons over there, even under the guise of aid. The U.S. aggressive stance in the Baltics, for example, we're moving tons and tons and tons of heavy equipment there. That's a policy change that benefits the military-industrial complex, which feeds policy change, and so on and so on. It's a huge ripoff.
Well, it's part of the budget, directly and indirectly, on exporting weapons. But, we deal with the military budget all the time, and this is what we want to really emphasize today, is who really is behind all of this. And there's certainly a lot of groups that benefit. But we're up around $600 billion, plus other things that they don't count. And it's in the discretionary budget, but it's a huge portion of the discretionary budget. It's more than 50% of the discretionary budget. I think we have a chart that we can put up just to show. And they claim that the discretionary budget is the only place we can cut. Of course, I think the whole budget is a place where we can cut. But nevertheless, this chart, I think, gives us an idea of what's going on.
Look what a big piece of pie the military gets. Not that the others should get more necessarily, but that's just enormous. I don't think people know that.
It's huge, and people are always hear the propaganda, and we'll give us some statistics about what happens when they have information versus propaganda. And I think it seems like, I bring this up frequently, that it seems like we're in the business of refuting propaganda and trying to give people some facts and convince them that there's a better way, and convince them that the propaganda that there's this great need for government to take care of us and run the economy and police the world is just totally unnecessary. So this year, there's a clamor. Of course, the supporters of the military spending, not defense spending, of course, the military spending, it's from all quarters. Yeah. We can't expect to get any help from the media. We can't expect to get any help from the leadership of either political party. And even those who profess to be on the peace side of the issues, an Obama-type individual who comes across as not enthusiastic about some of these things, they still spend the money. And where can we expect anything? I can't see how anybody can expect less spending from Hillary. No. And for that matter, I don't see anybody on the horizon that will literally cut militarization and military spending as a reason for cutting the budget.
Well, if you look at the recent presidential campaign over the past year or so, there were really, except for two candidates, I would say, that would be Bernie Sanders and Rand Paul. Aside from those two, every single candidate, unless I'm very mistaken, said that the military has been gutted, it has to be rebuilt. Even Hillary is much in favor of, for example, we talked a little bit about this rehabilitation of the nuclear program, $1 trillion. Yeah. She's in favor of that, $1 trillion.
There's common knowledge, so-called knowledge, because you hear it all the time, that Ronald Reagan won the Cold War by militarization. Build up the military, be strong, be tough and firm with the Soviets, because he forced them to spend more money on the military, and he bankrupted that country. Maybe there's a little bit of truth to that, but quite frankly, I don't think that's the major reason the Soviets collapsed. I think it collapsed because it was a failed system, and it was a predictable event, as Mises made, that socialism just doesn't work. So in a way, we're doing it to ourselves. Yeah. We're spending endless amounts of money on the military when we don't have the money, and it may well play a major role in our bankruptcy.
That's such a great point. It just shows the inconsistency of the neocons, or their detachment from reality, because the same neocons that would argue that, yes, we spent the Soviets into oblivion are the same ones that would urge us to spend ourselves into oblivion.
Well, there was a Wall Street publication that reported no matter who wins the presidency, defense spending will increase. Of course, once again, I'm cautious. Military spending will increase because I believe sincerely that if we had a different foreign policy, our defense and our borders and all would be much better secured. Our financial system would be better. Everything would be better. But everybody uses defense, and the people get lulled to sleep on this.
Well, that's information, and that's one of the things we wanted to talk about. You've always made the point, the difference between defense and military spending. And we have some polls that play that out.
Pew did a poll along with the University of Maryland, I believe, and as recent as April of this year, they found that 34% of the people wanted to decrease it. Thank goodness there was at least 34%. But that was with the routine information that they had. So they went and they modified the questions, and I don't know whether anybody's going to challenge them that they fixed the polling. I don't believe that. Pew wouldn't do that as much as trying to get on his information. But when they gave them factual information about how much we are spending, and they did another poll, 61% of them said decrease the spending. Yeah. It more than doubled with information. So this whole idea that it's politically correct, nobody wants to get up there. And you saw how I was on the receiving end. That I talked in these terms. Oh, I don't care about America. I wouldn't defend America. And un-American, don't defend the troops, and all this sort of thing. But when they get the information, because I am convinced the natural instinct of human beings, except for the very few, is for peace. Yeah. And why would anybody argue against and not promote a system of government that promotes peace and prosperity? And yet, superficially, that means the propaganda machine for the military-industrial complex, very, very powerful. And it's a big task for us to compete with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pew isn't alone. There was a Gallup poll done just this past February. 37% of the people asked said that we spend too little on defense, but 59% said we spend too much. So people do understand, especially when they have the information, and that's why we would probably refer to the military, industrial, congressional media complex.
Yes, there's a lot of people involved, and then you have the intellectuals who get contracts for investigations and development and all these things. So it is really very much big bucks involved. And but there's an end point to this, and I don't think we're quite there. But the end point to a system like this, with excessive spending, debt, and inflation, printing the money to pay the bills, it comes to an end sometimes as a big surprise. Although things look, people are very happy right now with the stock market, and say must be all right. But sometimes, just like in the year when the NASDAQ bubble burst, it was rather I think burst is a good term. Same way in 2008, with the housing bubble, it burst. Some event declares it no longer lasts. So I believe that's where we are today, because I think the markets are so distorted, partially because of this, but partially because of how we finance a system like that. And we finance these special interests and overseas activities that we don't need.
And you often say, when it comes to the financial side, that really cutting taxes is beside the point. The issue is cutting spending. Well, I think in the realm of military spending, it's the same thing. The issue of cutting the military budget is less important than the issue of changing our military policy, changing the idea that we must have global control. Because when you have that policy, the budget will come to fill that need.
Yeah, and if you had a policy where you're not the policeman of the world, all of a sudden you say, well, we don't need this. Okay. We don't need to do it. But the big thing would be to curtail in some manner, the lobbyists who run things. The lobbyists right now say they made a statement. They're not too worried about who wins the presidency, even though you can pick something out from what Trump says. They're still not worried. You can find something where he says, we're going to be the biggest and the strongest and I'm going to rebuild it. Yeah. But they say, we're just going to deal with the Congress. Oh, isn't that a good idea? That's where the government should be. The government should be with the people and through the Congress. But this is in a perverse manner. Yeah. I mean, is it the Congress standing up to the courts and standing up to the president, executive orders and all the terrible things that goes on in the administrative courts and all the regulations? No, finally, the Congress is being co-opted by the lobbyists. And what frustrates me is too often some people who are sympathetic with what we're saying and in ways allies, they say, And that's why, Ron, you have to regulate people's, lobby in Congress. Well, I thought we were allowed to petition the Congress. Yeah. It's how they're petitioning the Congress that makes the difference. And yet they insist that we need more laws. No, we need less government. That's what we need.
And, many of these representatives go on to become defense lobbyists, so they have something to protect in the future. I remember one of the very few times I saw you get angry, visibly angry with someone who came in to talk to you. I know it was someone you didn't want to see because you knew what he wanted, but he was a former member, and so you extended the courtesy. And he came in and he tried to strong-arm you into supporting a weapons system that you knew we didn't want, didn't need, and couldn't afford. And you almost literally kicked him out of the office.
Well, probably not, but I can remember the incident very well. And I think the frustration was, I knew the gentleman for a long time, and he knew where I stood. Why would he think? I mean, it was such an insult to me that, oh yeah, I'm a lobbyist now and I can talk him into this. So to me, I took it as a personal insult because he should have known. Most people might not know how strong I felt, but he knew where I stood.
And if the others did that, there wouldn't be a problem. They wouldn't listen.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Obviously, this is an issue that is very, very important, combating the lobbyists and presenting the case for a more peaceful foreign policy, one with non-intervention overseas, pointing out that there's a lot of powerful special interests, including the media and the political system, which is designed to prop up the military-industrial complex because war profiteering is a big deal. And unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get people into Congress with this election or the next election where we're finally going to get the majority vote and we will act sensibly and wean ourselves off. The systems like this come to an end with a calamitous type of incident, and that's what we're approaching, that's what we're working toward, unfortunately. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try and make the effort. Maybe a miracle will happen, but what we really need to work for is to present the case to show how we got into this mess and what's available to us, especially since this country and the world has been introduced to the issues and the ideas of liberty. More so, I think the ideas of liberty have been gradually evolving in a positive way over the many, many centuries. It's just that there's a lot of ups and downs. We certainly had a boost in these ideas with our Constitution and our early history. And now we have a setback. But that doesn't mean that we can't rebuild the ideas and the principles of liberty when this thing comes unglued, because it will. It has to be reversed. But like I said, if we could work it out and do it gradually, it could be done. But I think human nature is that the interests are so powerful that they won't allow any cuts in the military. They're right. The lobbyists are right. There will be no cuts in this military spending until the whole thing breaks up. And it might be, a major conflict that we can't handle anymore. It might be a dollar crisis. Who knows what it will be? But this system will end. And that our job is, of course, to offer something different. And it's very simple. It has to do with the concept of individual liberty, which emphasize the individual, not collective rights, not because you belong to a group. The marketplace that protects private property rights and contracts and sound money. And also a sensible foreign policy that is designed for peace and prosperity. That is, very simply, we ought to mind our own business. We need to come home. We need to talk to people and trade with people and get along with people, but we do not need to militarize the world. We need to just bring our troops home. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.